The Rincon Cultural Resource Department ayali won popovlum hish traviku a atvichum chakwi chokuna yatli shatachna. The Rincon Oral History Project lobi ikush nawimil achaninet ponkawun resevena pomom matachna. Chamcho love katachumich pomom telaya pom avivichum chamik michahanenek ponkala na resevna. Ona popoek.
Late fall, early winter, it was cold. So I remember usually it would be raining and the San Luis down there would be filled or flowing and we'd have to stay home because we couldn't get out because of the river from Paradise and San Luis, well, San Luis Rey. River would overflow and we couldn't get out. So that was our winter time.
Things I remember is just seemed like there was more water in the river when I first started, and things were different. Worked on tribal law for about 18 years, and things were a little crazier back then. You know, people did more running around, it was a little wilder, a lot of parties, things like that. And today seems like things have quieted down a lot. Some of our people, unfortunately, have passed on that lived here, and just the community's getting smaller and seems more quiet.
You have your season of where you would have, you know, the Santa Anas. They always started like in October into November, and then we always had the rainy season was always like January and February, especially because, well, I'm a February baby, so it was like, I think pretty much growing up, there was only a few times in my whole life that it didn't rain on my birthday. So, you know, it was always rainy in January and February, and then you know, spring, fall were always really, you know, kind of mild, other than, you know, the fall weather with the Santa Anas, but spring was always beautiful, mild temperatures. You'd have all the flowers blooming and, you know, everything. You'd smell the orange blossoms. And
summers, I remember, hot. We used to get some good winds. I used to see a lot of quail, a lot of dove. I don't see very much quail anymore. There were quite a few rabbits, jackrabbits mostly. There was always coyotes around.
One of my favorite memories back in the 90s, when the Head Start was open, is we didn't have a playground. We didn't have any fencing or anything. We used to take field trips, walking field trips, just right there down to the river. And it became a huge curriculum network almost. We could cover everything down there: science, art, studying the different creatures, eating watercress. It was great for the kids to go down there and splash around and hike around.
In the past, I think the seasons have changed quite a bit. The winters are colder, the summers are hotter. I remember thunderstorms in the wintertime, in the summertime, excuse me. Huge thunderstorms. The rivers were running. The heat now is just incredible. I don't remember that. As soon as the heat would come, the thunderstorms would come. The winters now are longer and colder, or I'm getting older, I'm not sure which one it would be. But I do definitely feel the difference in the temperatures of different seasons. But spring and fall are amazing here.
You know, I remember when I would come down, how extreme the weather seemed to be. I grew up in the suburbs and a mile and a half from the beach. So when I would come out in summer, I could not believe how hot it was. I can remember we left a birthday cake in the back of my grandfather's car for my great grandmother. And we went and had breakfast at Champions in Escondido. We came out, the frosting roses had melted. It was so hot, and winter was really cold, and we would spend the night, and in the morning everything would be covered with the white frost, not snow, frost, but we would go out and walk in it and we could see our footprints. And you know, spring and fall were just what I was used to, but winter and summer seemed very extreme to me.
Yeah, a few times when it rained hard, really, really hard for about a week. I mean, the river got running hard. It blew out the fence in the back by Oasis Gate, blew out that fence, rose all the way up almost to the bridge. People would get stuck in it trying to cross. We'd have to pull them out or call the fire department to come get them. And it was, it gets running pretty good.
Growing up, well, were the winds. Just people passing away, and you know, my mom, my dad, you know, my grandmas, grandpas, and aunts and uncles, cousins, you know, general bad things that did happen during Rincon that I do remember were tragic and sad.
The greatest memory I have is just my grandmother, my aunts. I'd come up when I was a kid with my grandmother, but don't really remember too much of it. I was born and raised in San Diego, and you know, back then tribal members, you know, they had to leave because there weren't jobs and things like that. So my grandmother relocated to San Diego when she met my grandfather. So I was born and raised down there, but just coming up here when I was a kid, and then joining tribal law in 2006 is when, you know.
Best, I guess just all of it, you know, because that's all we knew. You know, we didn't know we were poor, you know, we didn't think that way, we just lived. And I guess some of the best memories too was like when we get the box from the church and all the donations, and that was like Christmas every time that came. And yeah, the commods, and you know, just, you know, we didn't realize we were poor. You know, we had our school uniforms, you know, and that, so mom and dad didn't really have to worry about buying school clothes for the, you know, the whole year, because we went to Paula mission. But you know, but other than that, you know, we had our limited clothes that we got, you know, but we never lacked for food or clothing or any of that stuff. We had a roof over our head. We had
waking up in the cold morning with the smell of tortillas cooking on a wood stove. Never forget that smell. It was the best smell I ever had. Even to this day, I tell guys, you know, about this, and man, the best remember and best smell I ever had was tortillas cooking on a wood stove. My mom and my grandma, they made tortillas almost every day. You know, we had bread, but not as much as we had tortillas. It was good, a lot of butter.
My dad was involved a lot, even though we lived in Escondido. And I really enjoyed, we'd come out, of course, for the tribal membership meetings, and those were long days. We'd go to church in the morning in town, then drive out. And when I was little, that drive just seemed forever, and coming around the curve before we got to Valley Center, that big, long, deep ravine. And I had markers in my head. I was fascinated seeing the bright orange witch's hair covering a lot of the plants. And I looked forward to visiting aunties' homes. I liked the smell of their homes. I can smell something different. Maybe it's the foods they were cooking, but it was very distinct for me, and it was different. Never smelled it in town. And it was comforting. So I really enjoyed that, and listening to the conversations. I liked hearing the older ladies, especially with lilting voices, and laughing, and sometimes using Indian words mixed in if they couldn't think of something. And my dad was always seemed to be interviewing. He was always asking them questions. And so I learned a lot just hanging out with them and my dad mostly.
My best memory would have to be raising my children here. I have 3 children, married to my wife Lorena, and we have raised our kids here since the birth of the first one in 2001, and 2002 and 2005 were my 3 children born here. They're all in their 20s now, and those are my best memories of Rincon, living on the res and raising my family here.
It was fun because Rincon was our playground because we'd run up the hills and have our little football games way up in the hills. And this whole, like I said, this whole reservation was our playground, whether it was our cousins or with my brothers and sisters, and playing in the river. And it was fun when as a kids, teenagers. I went to boarding school at Sherman Indian High School for my teenage years, so then after that, just went to Palomar College, and that spent most of my 20s prior to my 30s, and from my 30s up until now, probably at 40s, I was here, we're taking care of my mom. And
when I was growing up, the river ran, well, we call it the river. It ran quite a bit. There was always cattle and horses on the road, and actually, growing up, you just took it for granted for what was here. There was nothing here. Everybody had kerosene lamps, and you could look down in the valley and you might catch a flicker of a kerosene lamp somewhere at a house way down below.
There, at times, and you'll have some family feuds, but most of the time I see everybody gets along pretty well. There has been, in the past, some rivalries and stuff, but overall, our tribal people down here, for the most part, we have our squabbles and our fights, but when something affects all of us, we do have the tendency to band together and help each other out. And I see that a lot down here, whereas in other areas, and I've, worked and lived different places. And so, I've worked with tribal people all over the country. And so, being in their tribal communities, you don't always see that, camaraderie between, other tribes in that area, or even them working together. They're like their own, basically, they're a sovereign nation. So they're literally like their own sovereign nation. They don't really work well together.
It was really interesting for me to be in that position, working there. I was newly divorced and I needed work, and I also had a child turning 3 and in '94, I think is that when we opened. And so I got a job there, and I really then began to know the families, the current families in that way, which I didn't before know who was related to who. And during those days, we were wild. Like I said, we had no playground. We had runners, kids that they didn't want to be there, and they knew the reservation, and they'd just take off and they'd go home. They'd run down to the river. They knew how to get to the river and get home. It was kind of crazy that way. We had people, delivering their kids to school on those little mini bikes, no helmets for anybody. And as a director, I would always be like, this is dangerous, but I would have to make the call, It's like, you don't call CPS on something like that. And I was having to learn what my position was, and how to communicate respectfully.
Before I was on council, I was on the Tribal Law Enforcement Department for about 13 years. Worked my way up to being the Tribal Law Enforcement Manager, running the department. A lot of changes happened in that time. Something bad happened, and the tribe decided they want it to be safer on their reservation. So they established a Tribal Law Enforcement Department, and through that, it was a community-oriented policing more. It wasn't, a police force, but it was a security force that was here more to help the people, even in their day-to-day, whatever they needed. We were there for them in whatever capacity we could be.
I've been on the culture committee since '97, and it's been a bit of a rocky road. We've had, back then, we had leadership who didn't always get along with members of the culture committee. We were disbanded at one time. And before gaming, we had very little money. No budget at all, really. They put in a Coke machine or a Pepsi machine in the tribal hall, and whatever came out of that was our budget. That was it. So it was all we could do at the time to keep up with, notices, things like that. So it's changed tremendously. Now that there's gaming and we have a real budget, we can, we have the money to repatriate to, like what we're doing now. Documenting our history, building up our archives. We didn't have that before. And the people that we have to do that are wonderful. Chris, Bianca, all of you, all of the staff, you guys are just building up this wonderful bank of knowledge for future generations.
We would go all the way up to Oasis Ranch and sneak across the fence and go across into La Jolla's backyard and the ponds, the fishing, the catfish. Really had a great childhood living on the reservation. As I said, we were farmers, and when we would irrigate our fields, was coming out of the San Luis Rey water, which was running certain times, but the wells were deep here, a lot of water.
But we couldn't leave. We just couldn't leave. We were just like, what do we gather? We were just kind of looking around like, what do we get? And so I got what I could think of, and I left 90%. On my tragedy, I called my Kachina dog. I left him in there. But anyways, so we got out. We had to leave the dogs and, her dog. And so we got out, we evacuated to the casino and everything like that. So it came through like a hurricane, literally like a hurricane. And so finally when things settled down and fire went through, we snuck out of the casino because we weren't supposed to leave, and came to the house and saw it. And at first it looked like, because it was burning so much that it looked white, because the house was white before it burned. It was like, so I was like, I thought the house stayed, and I was like, it made it. So, but you could look in the windows, you saw the flames. It was gone. So I was standing there for like in awe and dismay, and it was like, I'm thinking, just lost my house. We lost everything.
And by the time I got to Lazy H, it was just, I have chills on my arms. Everything just seemed like it was leveled. And I'd never seen or experienced wildfire like that, where it creates its own weather. And it was just incredible. Everything was gone, and like went from nothing to, 80 to 100 mile an hour winds, and it was just catastrophic. And driving around with some of the guys, there were spot fires in areas like the church. We were sitting by the church, and it just combusted because we hadn't realized that embers had gone underneath, and all of the how dry it was, and it was just never seen anything like it.
You pull in just before the cattle guard to Philip and Martha and them's place. So we parked there for a little bit, and we got out and we were watching the flames and of course from that angle you couldn't really see where the fire was. You can just see the glow. But then we started hearing bangs and pops, and we're like, oh my God, the propane tanks blew up. Okay, my house is gone. And we kept hearing boom, boom, boom. But then the fire was shifting, or the wind was shifting, and then it started coming, like we could see the flames coming towards us. So then it was heading towards Stephanie and them street. And then we could see kind of the glow coming over the back of the mountain, like heading towards, the ghetto area. And we're like.
By the time I started evacuating, I could see a big glow. And the wind was bad. I seen a big glow coming in the back of the hill by the cemetery. And by the time that I packed up to leave, the wind had blew The fire, to catch this hill on fire, and a lot of Rincon. But by the time I left, to evacuate, it was crazy. It was wild. My son had a house in Valley Center, so we went up there and we all stayed with them. I don't care if they had 1 million firemen here, working here. They couldn't have done anything about that fire at all. It was just too fast, too quick. And the wind was strong, bad. I mean,
Thought we were completely out of the blue of that witch fire that started, and it seemed that it was over on the coast and it had moved on and we were okay. And then about 4 in the morning, I smelled it and I turned on the radio, bedside radio that I had been keeping, and I heard that it had started up the hill. Called the fire department. They told me to consider it my evacuation call. And so I called my kids to come from San Marcos to help me evacuate my parents. And we just started pulling everything out. When they got Mom and Dad in the car, the fire was already starting to burn the garage, and they escaped. My son and I, he didn't have a driver's license, but he drove a vehicle with the animals in it. We had a dog and cats, and we threw a few things in, and we all got away, but both of our homes burned to the ground.
I remember I didn't know what to do during the fire, so we went to the casino. I was working there. Because it had all that, asphalt around it, I thought, okay, that's the safest place for us to go right now. And all the other tribal members were there with their pets, and everybody. We were just walking around, asking one another, "Are you okay? Did you everybody get out safe?" That kind of thing, and we just kind of grieved together. After that, though, I mean, the generosity of people, including the people at the casino, I mean, they donated stuff, and they set up a room where you could shop to get things, but our tribal members too. It's like, if I've got 2 of something, you can have one because you lost everything. And we all bicker and we fight, we got, this family and that family, or this person and that person, but you know what? When something like that happens, we forget all the petty stuff. Everybody came together. The sense of community after that tragedy was incredible, just incredible.
I think it's important for people to know that we still do have our wakes, our Naquanish songs, and we're still doing it for people. We're still it's part of our religion, and we still do it. We still practice it today. There may not be as many people that practice today, but we still do have singers, and we still do have people that know how to do them. And yeah, also part of the whole wake, everything, we still do our clothes burnings. 3 days after the funeral, we have a clothes burning. We burn their personal items, their close personal items, and that's still we still sing our songs there and have dancers, and that's still going today. It's not dead, it's not gone, and we still have that, and we need to hold on to it.
Don't forget your past, learn your customs and tradition, keep the language, keep the songs, and always remember, you guys are our future. There's nothing that should stop you. Look to the stars, reach to the stars. Without you, we have no future. Without your past, we're your past, but keep going into the future. There's nothing wrong with being different. There's nothing wrong with looking past beyond what your abilities can carry you. Take what you love and expand on it. If you love doing art, you like doing music, poetry, writing, go for it. There's nothing that should stop you. Don't let somebody tell you no, when no is the basic line to weigh you down. No is a good answer, but it's not the correct answer. Keep reaching, keep going. You guys are everything.
I would say most important for the kids, I think, is get your education. Go to school, get experience, and always come home, you know, and be part of both worlds, see how finance and everything else, the outside works for kids that are on the reservation and also off. I think the most important thing is, you know, be a large part of the community and definitely get your education and just do the best you can. And I think if you focus, try and do the best you can, everything seems to always work out.
Learning your ways, you know, learning about your history, who your family is, who you come from, you know, just keeping that alive and carrying that down to, because at some point, you know, I mean, especially here in Rincon, you know, we only recognize Rincon blood. So at some point, you know, those numbers are very, very muchly depleting. And so when you think of it that way, even if they don't make any changes to how we, you know, enroll people to our tribe, you know, you're going to have to think of ways to help you. How are you going to keep preserving who we are?
But some of the young ones, for whoever they are or whatever, I kind of wish that they would think twice before they say something or do something. And if you do something, just kind of think of the consequences as to what's going to happen. Because once you do something bad, you can't take it back. You know? It's like if you go up to talk to somebody and they ask you a question, and just the sake of being the way you are, you give them kind of a lousy answer. And later on you think about it and you go up and you say, well, I'm sorry I answered you that way. You can't take it back. You already said it.
I can't tell them to set their phone and tablets down, but I can say that in addition to it, at least download Tete Lawuncha. Try to include learning some language. Be curious about where you come from, even if you are not as much Indian as you would like to be, but find that identity for yourself because it's unique, it's precious, and it's something that will keep us going. We are good at adapting, and they can see that because they have adapted to a completely different new culture around them, but not to let go of this and not to forget it and not to value money over our hearts.
When we try to use differences to divide ourselves, we do more harm than good. It's your birthright, no matter where you grew up. And, you know, we need to be generous too. We're like, well, they don't know their culture. Well, then teach them. You know, teach them. You got a gift they didn't, so share. That's the only thing I would say. Quit using that to divide us and share what you know and accept them and understand they're no different than you. That's it.
But the history that really goes farther back about the ancestors is how they were taken off the reservation, how they were removed and tried to be assimilated into the white society, and the resiliency of the tribes always being here, and the resiliency of our ancestors to fight for their identity. The identity is where yes, to this day we still, you know, our lineals are still looking for identity. That's the key for a reservation, is to make sure that you don't lose your identity and you don't lose your culture and you don't lose your past. Those are the things that I really feel strong about to talk about my past and my family lineage.